This one's called Boris, the boy who fell upwards. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Boris. Boris was blessed with an extraordinary skill set. He was very wealthy, had spectacular hair, and spoke with a voice so posh that he sounded like how Americans think that every British person sounds. Sometimes Boris would employ that posh accent of his in such a peculiar way. He'd gibber and jabber, he'd splitter and splatter. To some observers, it almost sounded like he didn't have a fucking clue what he was going on about. But out of all the skills that Boris possessed, there was one that stood head and shoulders above the rest. Boris was the only human being to completely defy gravity. Because every time he fell, instead of going down, Boris went up. Safe in that knowledge, Boris spent his entire life ballsing up everything he touched, only to then be rewarded with an even better opportunity. Boris could even use racist and homophobic language without consequence. Everyone would just roll their eyes and playfully proclaim, "Oh, Boris," as if they were gently scolding a toddler who'd burped at the dinner table. When he said that single mothers are ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illegitimate, "Oh, Boris." Comparing gay marriage to bestiality, "Oh, Boris." "Oh, Boris." "Oh, Boris." And should be inserted into a pig's anus. "Oh, Boris." Sometimes Boris would tell little fibbies. Indeed, he was sacked from his job at a national newspaper for fabricating a quote. He was sacked from the shadow cabinet for lying. And in 2016, he wrote a little fibby on the side of a bus that was later proven to be absolute horseshit. But armed with his trusty superpower, with every sacking and forced resignation due to unbelievable incompetence, Boris moved yet another rung up the political ladder. The only thing as prolific as Boris's bullshit and bigotry appeared to be his bollocks. Boris was reported to have as many as 7, 4, 8, 50, 47 children. Boris was reported to have many children. Oh, Boris. One day, Boris finally got the job he'd been dreaming about his entire life. He became British Prime Minister. The problem was, despite really wanting to be Prime Minister, Boris didn't want to do the actual job that a Prime Minister should do, on the account of him being a lazy, self-entitled gobshit. This was especially true during the nasty global pandemic of 2020. In the lead-up to the pandemic, when every day was vital, Boris missed more Cobra meetings than his own children's birthdays, choosing not to bother with things like strategies or plans to protect his citizens. When the pandemic began, he simply couldn't be asked to attend the daily briefings, despite living in the room upstairs. What a lazy shit! But none of this mattered to Boris, because he knew, armed with his superpower, the bigger the fuck up he made of his current job, the bigger and better his next job would be. So join me next week for Boris, the malevolent ruler of the entire universe. By the way, his real first name is Alexander, but that's nowhere near as fluffy, is it? Good night.